When Alexander Whitmore disguised himself as the new cleaner and stepped into his own mansion, he had no idea he was walking into the hidden cruelty behind his engagement. A fiancé's cold rule over his paralyzed son. What looked like concern and household management quickly revealed itself as systematic emotional abuse. But what he discovered in those first terrible moments changed everything forever. You won't believe what Beatrice was capable of when she thought no one was watching. Before we continue, if you believe that every child with disability deserves to be loved and cared for, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Alexander Whitmore's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the navy blue maintenance cap in his car mirror. 2 years since losing his wife, and never once had he done something this desperate. The idea had come to him the night before, after watching Beatrice's face transform from sweetness to ice the moment she thought he'd left the hallway. That image stuck like a splinter in his mind. What happens when I'm not there? By morning, he'd made his decision. He paid Mr. Hale, the fired cleaner, to stay quiet and borrowed his uniform. A false identity card read Eric Hale, nephew of a former employee. Now wearing the blue maintenance overalls, white t-shirt underneath, and a matching cap, as he walked toward his own estate, disguised as a stranger. Early morning. He greeted the security guard at the iron gates, keeping his voice lower than usual. The guard glanced at him, then at the clipboard. "You must be the new cleaner. Mrs. Whitmore mentioned someone was starting today." Alexander's chest tightened at hearing Beatrice called by that title. She wasn't his wife yet. He nodded and entered the stone driveway he'd walked 1,000 times. But everything looked different from this angle. The manicured gardens, the fountain he'd commissioned after Emma died, the bay windows of Ethan's room, none of it felt like home anymore. Then Beatrice appeared in the doorway. Striking as always, wearing a form-fitting red dress with a black belt cinched at her waist, her long brown hair falling in perfect waves past her shoulders. She looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Alexander braced himself, certain she'd recognize him despite the cap and work clothes. But she didn't even meet his eyes. "You must be Eric," she said coolly, her tone flat and businesslike. "Yes, ma'am," he answered, keeping his head slightly bowed. "I expect efficiency and discretion. This household runs on precision, not excuses. Don't touch anything you're not assigned to clean. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." Beatrice turned away without another word. "Maya will show you where supplies are kept and explain the schedule. I don't tolerate carelessness." Alexander's throat constricted. Beatrice had never spoken to anyone like that when he was present. Certainly not with such cold dismissal. Moments later, a young woman appeared from the hallway. Maya, the nanny. She was a warm, composed black woman in her late 20s, wearing a professional navy blue uniform dress with white collar and trim, the household staff attire Beatrice insisted upon. Her hair was styled neatly, and despite the formal uniform, her dark eyes held unmistakable kindness and warmth. "Hi, I'm Maya," she said gently, offering a small, reassuring smile. "Come on, I'll show you around. Don't let her intimidate you, just do your work and stay out of her way when she's in a mood." Alexander followed her down the corridor, pretending to be just another hired hand. "Busy household?" he asked carefully. Maya's smile faded slightly as she glanced toward the living room. "Ethan, Mr. Whitmore's son, needs constant care. He's 5 and uses a wheelchair. Such a sweet, bright boy, but—" She stopped herself, choosing words carefully. "Mrs. Beatrice has very high standards. Sometimes too high." "What do you mean?" Alexander prompted, his heart beginning to race. Maya glanced over her shoulder, then lowered her voice. "She doesn't have patience with him. With his condition. With accidents. With anything that disrupts her perfect schedule." Before she could say more, a sound echoed from the living room, a child's sharp intake of breath, then an adult voice rising in anger. "I told you to sit still." Beatrice's voice, sharp as broken glass. Maya's entire body tensed, her professional composure cracking for just a moment. "Oh no," she whispered. "Stay here, I need to." But Alexander was already moving toward the sound, his disguise forgotten in his rising panic. Through the open archway of the elegant living room, he saw something that made his blood turn cold. At the center of the spacious room with its cream-colored sofas and ornate gold-framed mirrors, Ethan sat in his wheelchair. The boy wore a bright red t-shirt and jeans, and despite being only 5 years old, his face already carried the weight of fear beyond his years. His small hands gripped the wheelchair armrests so tightly they trembled. His breathing came in shallow, rapid gasps. Beatrice stood directly in front of him, leaning down with one hand raised in an aggressive gesture. Her elegant features were twisted with rage, her mouth open mid-shout. The polished woman from moments ago had vanished completely. "You're useless," she snapped, her voice echoing off the tall ceilings. "All you do is create problems. Why can't you do one simple thing without making everything difficult?" Ethan's head dropped, his whole body shrinking into the wheelchair. A single tear rolled down his cheek, but he wouldn't look at her. He knew better than to respond. Maya rushed past Alexander, immediately positioning herself protectively beside the wheelchair, one hand gently resting on Ethan's shoulder. "He didn't mean to," she said quietly but firmly, standing as a barrier between the boy and Beatrice. "The book just fell. It wasn't his fault." Beatrice straightened and turned her fury on Maya. "Stay out of this. I'm done making excuses for incompetence, his or yours." Then she noticed the man in the blue overalls standing frozen in the doorway, mop still in hand, red bucket at his feet. Her expression shifted, not to sweetness exactly, but to composed, cold authority. The mask sliding back into place. "And you are," she demanded, her voice controlled now but still edged with irritation. Alexander forced his voice to remain steady, his accent slightly different from his natural tone. "Eric Hale, ma'am. The new cleaner." Beatrice looked him up and down with barely concealed contempt, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Good. Make sure you're more reliable than the last one. He couldn't follow basic instructions." "Basic instructions?" Alexander's mind reeled. She just screamed at a terrified 5-year-old child, "My child," and she's talking about basic instructions? But he stayed silent, nodding once, gripping the mop handle to keep his hands from shaking. He needed to see everything. He needed proof that would hold up, that would protect Ethan forever. Beatrice smoothed her red dress, adjusted her belt, and swept past him toward the hallway, her heels clicking authoritatively on the marble floor. "Get to work," she said without looking back. "This floor won't clean itself." The moment she disappeared around the corner, Maya immediately knelt beside Ethan's wheelchair, both hands gentle on his small shoulders. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice soft and soothing. "You're safe now. It's okay." Ethan finally looked up, and Alexander saw his son's eyes, blue like his mother's, now red-rimmed and swimming with unshed tears, filled with a fear no child should ever know. A fear of someone who was supposed to love him. A fear that had been growing for months while Alexander had been blind. The boy's gaze drifted past Maya and landed on the cleaner in the doorway, this stranger with the mop and bucket. For just a moment, their eyes met. Ethan didn't know it was his father. But somewhere deep in that connection, the child seemed to sense something. Someone who saw. Someone who cared. And in that moment, Alexander knew, he hadn't overreacted. If anything, he'd waited far too long. 3 days passed like slow torture. Alexander scrubbed floors he'd once walked across in tailored suits. He dusted furniture he'd chosen with Emma. He emptied trash bins and polished mirrors, all while watching his son suffer. And the pattern became unmistakably clear. When Beatrice spoke on the phone with friends, her voice dripped honey. "Oh, Ethan's doing wonderfully. Such a brave little boy." When the wedding planner visited, she smiled radiantly, her hand resting on Ethan's shoulder as if she cherished him. But the moment they left, the mask dropped. "Stop staring at me like that," she'd snap when Ethan watched her too long. When he moved his wheelchair slowly through a doorway, she'd roll her eyes so dramatically it looked theatrical. "Could you be any slower?" She mocked his careful movements. Criticized his speech when he struggled with difficult words. Sighed with exaggerated impatience when he asked for help reaching his favorite book on the shelf, then walked away without helping. "Figure it out yourself," she'd say. "You need to learn independence." He was 5 years old. Maya caught the worst of Beatrice's contempt. When she gently corrected Beatrice's harsh tone, she'd get cut off mid-sentence. "I don't recall asking for your opinion, Maya. Do your job and let me handle discipline." When Maya suggested Ethan needed more encouragement, Beatrice dismissed her entirely. "Your job is to follow my instructions, not question them." But Maya never stopped protecting him. Alexander watched from doorways and hallways, his cleaning cart his cover. He saw Maya adjust Ethan's wheelchair straps with practiced gentleness. Saw her wipe tears from his cheeks with soft reassurances. Heard her reading bedtime stories through the crack in Ethan's door, her voice full of warmth Beatrice never showed. Then came the moment that nearly broke him. Late afternoon, cleaning the upstairs hallway. Alexander heard Maya's whisper from Ethan's room. "Don't listen to her, sweetheart. You're strong. You're brave. I'm right here." A pause. Then Ethan's small, trembling voice. "Why does she hate me?" Alexander's hand froze on the mop handle. His vision blurred. Every instinct screamed to burst through that door, to drop the disguise, to gather his son in his arms and tell him the truth. "I'm here. I see everything. You're safe now." But his hand stayed on the mop. He needed more. Legal proof. Documentation. Something irrefutable that would protect Ethan permanently, that would ensure Beatrice could never come near him again. Alexander forced himself to breathe. Forced himself to keep cleaning. Soon, he told himself. The truth always reveals itself. He just didn't know how soon would be. The kitchen was empty when Alexander found Maya preparing Ethan's afternoon snack, crackers arranged on a plate shaped like a smiley face. "You're good with him," Alexander said quietly, pretending to clean the counters nearby. Maya glanced up, guarded. "Just doing my job." "No." He kept his voice gentle. "I've seen how you are with the boy. You really care." She studied him for a long moment, weighing whether this new cleaner could be trusted. Finally, she sighed. "I've been here 8 months. Since just before she arrived." "And the boy? Has he always been so?" Alexander struggled to find the word. "Scared?" Maya finished bitterly. "No." She set down the knife she'd been using. "When I started, Ethan was different. He talked more, asked questions about everything. He tried to smile when you made jokes. He loved story time." Her voice softened with the memory. He was healing. Slowly. After losing his mother. What changed? Beatrice. The name came out sharp. 6 months ago, she started spending more time here. Planning the wedding, she said. Getting to know Ethan. Maya's jaw tightened. Within weeks, he stopped talking as much. Started having nightmares. Would flinch when she entered a room. Alexander's grip on the cleaning cloth tightened. "Did you tell anyone?" "I tried." Maya's frustration broke through. "I spoke to Mr. Whitmore several times. But Beatrice always had explanations. He's adjusting to change. He's testing boundaries. Maya's overprotective and undermining my authority." She mimicked Beatrice's polished tone perfectly. "And honestly? I think part of him wanted to believe her. He was so lonely after his wife died. Beatrice seemed like hope. But you kept trying to protect the boy anyway." Maya's eyes glistened. "If I push too hard, she'll fire me. She's threatened it twice already. And then who will protect him?" Her voice cracked. "That little boy deserves better. He's already lost so much. He shouldn't have to lose feeling safe in his own home too." Alexander opened his mouth to respond, to tell her everything, to promise it would end, but Beatrice's voice cut through the house like a blade. "Maya, where are you? Ethan needs to be moved to the therapy room. Now." Maya's entire body tensed. She grabbed the plate quickly, her hand shaking slightly. As she passed Alexander, she whispered without looking at him. "Be careful around her. She sees everything as a threat to her control." Then she was gone. Alexander stood alone in the kitchen, his heart pounding with rage and guilt and determination. Maya had been fighting this battle alone for months. Trying to protect his son while he'd been blind. Not anymore. This nightmare has to end now. Morning sunlight streamed through the dining room windows, painting everything gold. It should have been peaceful. Ethan sat at the table in his wheelchair, his special adapted tray positioned carefully across the armrests. Maya had poured him apple juice in a plastic cup with a wide base, designed specifically to prevent spills. But even the best designs fail sometimes. Ethan reached for his toast. His elbow caught the cup's edge. Everything happened in slow motion, the cup tipping, the golden liquid splashing across the tray, dripping onto the pristine marble floor. "Oh no," Ethan whispered, his eyes going wide with panic. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't." Beatrice's chair scraped back violently. "Are you kidding me?" Her voice exploded across the room. She stood, her red dress vivid against the pale morning light, and stormed toward him. Her heels struck the marble like hammer blows. Click, click, click. Ethan shrank back, his small hands gripping the wheelchair armrests. "How many times do I have to tell you?" Beatrice seized the wheelchair handles, jerking it toward her. She leaned down until her face was inches from his. "Stop being careless." Ethan flinched so violently the entire wheelchair shook. Tears spilled down his cheeks, but he didn't make a sound. He'd learned silence was safer. It was an accident. Maya appeared from the kitchen doorway, rushing forward. "Stay out of this." Beatrice spun on her. "That's enough." Maya positioned herself beside the wheelchair, her voice firm despite her trembling hands. He's 5 years old. It was juice. Just juice. Get out of my way. Beatrice's fury turned volcanic. Then she reached for Ethan's wrist, fast, harsh, fingers closing like a trap. Her intention was written in every line of her body. She was going to hurt him. Alexander stood frozen across the room, mop in hand. Time crystallized into a single, perfect moment of clarity. No more watching. No more waiting. No more evidence gathering. His son needed him now. The mop clattered to the floor. Stop. One word. Quiet. Absolute. Beatrice's hand halted mid-grab. She spun around, her face twisted with rage. What did you just? Alexander pulled off his cap. Straightened to his full height. Met her eyes with the cold fury of a father who'd seen enough. I said stop. Recognition crashed across Beatrice's face like a wave. The cleaner wasn't a cleaner at all. And she'd just revealed everything he needed to see. The word hung in the air like a blade suspended above them all. Beatrice spun around, her face still flushed with anger. And what do you want, cleaner? Alexander straightened slowly. Deliberately. He pulled off the navy cap and dropped it to the floor. His eyes, no longer downcast, no longer deferential, locked onto hers with an intensity that made her take an involuntary step back. I'm not the cleaner. His voice was quiet. Steady. Dangerous. He stepped closer. My name is Alexander Whitmore. Beatrice's expression flickered, confusion crossing her features like a shadow. Her mouth opened. Closed. Her mind working to process what her eyes were seeing. This is my house. Another step. And that, he pointed to Ethan, still trembling in his wheelchair, is my son. The room's atmosphere shifted instantly. Electric. Volatile. The air itself seemed to crackle with barely restrained violence. Beatrice's face drained of all color. You tricked me? I needed to see who you were when you thought I wasn't watching. Alexander's voice remained terrifyingly controlled, each word measured and precise. And I saw everything. Every cruel word. Every rolled eye. Every time you made him feel worthless. Every time you screamed at a 5-year-old child for being a child. He's difficult. Beatrice's shock gave way to desperate defense. He needs discipline. Structure. You coddle him, that's why he's... Stop. Alexander's voice cut through her excuses like steel. Don't you dare blame him for your cruelty. Behind him, Maya stood with one protective hand on Ethan's shoulder. Silent. Witnessing. Ethan stared at the cleaner, at his father, with wide, confused eyes. Relief and fear and disbelief warring across his small face. His father had been here. His father had seen. You hurt my son, Alexander continued, his rage barely leashed beneath the surface. Repeatedly. Systematically. You terrorized him in his own home. I was helping. I've seen enough. His words fell like a judge's gavel. I know exactly who you are, Beatrice. And you will never touch him again. Beatrice's face transformed rapidly, shock melting into fear, fear hardening into something calculating. Her eyes darted between Alexander and the door. Between submission and defiance. Her hands clenched into fists. The storm was about to break. Beatrice's fear lasted only seconds before it twisted into something uglier. Desperate fury blazed across her face. You betrayed me. Her voice rose to a shriek. You humiliated me. Spied on me in my own home. My home, Alexander corrected icily. I gave up everything for you. Beatrice's hands gestured wildly, her polished composure shattered completely. My career. My life in the city. I tried to help your son, to give him the discipline he desperately needed, and this is how you repay me. Alexander's voice dropped to something colder than winter. You hurt him. Repeatedly. Deliberately. There is no defense for that. I loved you. Beatrice's rage escalated, her eyes darting around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to blame for her unraveling. They landed on Maya, still standing protectively beside Ethan's wheelchair. This is your fault. Beatrice pointed an accusatory finger at the nanny. You turned him against me. She lunged toward the side table and grabbed a heavy crystal vase, one of Emma's favorites, Alexander noticed distantly. Beatrice gripped it like a weapon. You poisoned his mind against me. She advanced on Maya, the vase raised. You ruined everything. Maya immediately stepped back, her hands on Ethan's wheelchair, pulling him away from Beatrice's fury. Shielding him with her body. You ruined it yourself, Maya said quietly. Beatrice moved forward, arm raised, crystal catching the light. Alexander stepped between them. Put it down. His voice was ice. Absolute. Final. Beatrice froze, the vase trembling in her raised hand. She protected my son, Alexander said, each word deliberate and cutting. You hurt him. Those are the only facts that matter. Nothing else. Beatrice's hand shook violently. Her face contorted, rage and humiliation and the dawning realization that she'd lost completely. The vase slipped from her fingers. It shattered against the marble floor, crystal fragments exploding outward like her carefully constructed facade finally breaking apart. "You'll regret this." Beatrice's voice cracked on the words. "You'll see. He'll never be normal. You'll come crawling back. It's over." Alexander's tone left no room for negotiation. "Leave. Now." Beatrice stood there for one more heartbeat, breathing hard, mascara smudged. Then she grabbed her designer purse from the console table and stormed toward the front door. She paused at the threshold, looking back one final time. Her expression held pure hatred and defeat. The door slammed behind her with a sound like thunder. Then silence fell over the room like snow, soft and absolute. It was over. No more shouting. No more shattering crystals. No more cruelty masquerading as discipline. Alexander stood in the center of the room, still wearing his cleaner's uniform, and felt something break loose inside his chest, a weight he'd been carrying for months finally lifting. His legs nearly gave out. Maya moved first. She knelt beside Ethan's wheelchair, her movements gentle as always, and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "You're safe now," she whispered. "She's gone. She can't hurt you anymore." Ethan's voice came out small and trembling. "Daddy?" It was the first word he'd spoken since the confrontation began. That single word, uncertain, hopeful, afraid to believe, shattered what remained of Alexander's composure. He dropped to his knees beside the wheelchair, his arms wrapping carefully around his son's small frame. Ethan felt so fragile. So precious. "I'm here," Alexander whispered against Ethan's hair. "I'm so sorry, buddy. I should have seen it sooner. I should have protected you better." And then Ethan cried. Not the silent, fearful tears he'd learned to hide. Real sobs, releasing months of fear and pain and confusion. His small hands clutched his father's shirt as if afraid to let go. Maya stayed close, one hand resting lightly on Ethan's back. Not interfering. Just present. A quiet anchor in the storm of emotion. They stayed like that, the three of them, until Ethan's sobs softened into hiccups, then into exhausted breathing. Finally, Alexander lifted his head and looked at Maya. Really looked at her. This woman who'd stood between his son and a monster when he hadn't been watching. "You saved him," he said, his voice thick with gratitude. "When I wasn't there, you were his shield. You protected him when I failed to." Maya shook her head gently. "I only did what anyone should do. I cared about him." "No." Alexander's voice was firm. "Most people would have looked away. Told themselves it wasn't their business. You didn't." He paused, understanding settling over him. Sometimes caring is the bravest thing of all. Ethan shifted in his wheelchair, reaching one small hand toward Maya. She took it immediately, squeezing gently. His silent thank you. Alexander saw it then, the shape of their future. Not a traditional family. Not perfect. But real. Built on protection and trust and love that had been tested in fire. "Things will be different now," Alexander promised, looking at both of them. "Better. I swear it." The mansion felt different already. Lighter. Softer. The afternoon sun streaming through the windows looked warmer somehow. Ethan leaned his head against Maya's shoulder, and for the first time in months, perhaps since his mother died, he smiled. A small, genuine smile. Alexander felt his heart crack open and rebuild itself around that smile. This was home again. Not because of the marble floors or crystal chandeliers or expensive furniture. But because of this, a father who finally saw the truth, a nanny who never stopped caring, and a little boy who was learning he could be safe again. Love had won. And that was everything. Thank you for watching till the end. Click subscribe and let me know the lessons you learned in the comment below, and turn on the notification bell because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it.